look forward to these treaties being handled properly.
Tonight, a court appeal stands in the way of a negotiated increase to treaty payments in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory.
It's extremely important that we send a message that our lives of our Indigenous girls matter.
A 3-time Indigenous convicted killer gets a hefty sentence for the death of Jeanenne Fontaine.
When I first came in here, I felt like I had failed my family.
And Maori Television brings us into New Zealand's largest prison for women. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. A major announcement from the British Columbia government this week, who say that changes to the education system will change the lives of Indigenous students in the province. APTN's Tina House has the story.
Here at the Capilano Littlest One School, students, First Nations leaders, and politicians gathered to announce a new 5-year agreement for First Nations students in BC.
We are here today to celebrate the signing of a new province-wide tripartite education agreement. It is a groundbreaking agreement. It is the first of its kind in Canada. It has been a long time coming.
The new $20 million agreement will invest funding into First Nations schools, including resources for First Nations language and culture, with technology a major component of that. It's to enhance learning opportunities for students. New policies will also see First Nations languages being offered in public schools. For National Chief Perry Bellegarde, he says he's excited to see the potential of First Nations young people.
And studies have shown that when you're fluent in your language, you're more successful at school and therefore more successful in life. And that's what this is about. So to the mun, you're going to have a good opportunity, and you are going to be doctors and lawyers and national chiefs too.
Grand Chief Ed John was one of the leaders who worked towards negotiating the agreement.
When we started this in the late 1980s, we had children graduating at 25% from high school. Now we're up around 70% graduation rates. We're not anywhere on par with graduation rates for the general public, but we're improving year by year by year.
He says when he was a student, things were much different then, and now kids have a huge opportunity to become successful in life.
I went to an Indian residential school up to grade 8, and then to a residential school per se in high school from grade 9 to grade 12. And the challenges were completely different. Children and youth now have completely different opportunities.
It influences provincial education policy in a different way and flows provincial funding to on-reserve schools in a different way.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
First Nation leaders in Northern Ontario say they're disappointed to hear the province will be appealing the recent Superior Court decision in the historic Robinson-Huron Treaty money case. The ruling came down just before Christmas. It said the 21 First Nations along Lake Huron should be receiving more than the $4 annual treaty annuity they've been getting since 1874. No settlement number was offered in the court's decision. That was left up to the parties to negotiate.
Ontario will stay at the table, and we'll be able to satisfy them at the table that we can come up with a good deal. I'm kind of excited about sitting down in negotiations. I'm not happy with the appeal, because we thought that the judge's ruling was pretty convincing.
It's great, considering for reconciliation. It's a great move on everybody's part, and to honor the treaties also the way they were meant to be.
We look forward to these treaties being handled properly, protecting the interests of taxpayers, but also moving forward with Indigenous communities on settling things in the context of treaty that need to be dealt with.
A judge has found the editor and publisher of a free newspaper in the Toronto area guilty of peddling hate.
This is a type of a law that's not always used. It shouldn't always be used. We have to be careful. But when you reach that threshold of hatred, you're going to be punished.
The judge says Your Ward News editor-in-chief James Sears and publisher Leroy St. Germain clearly promoted hatred against women and Jews. The prosecution argued the paper was filled with, quote, vile and degrading articles and imagery about the groups. Sears and St. Germain maintained they were being satirical. However, the judge says there's nothing funny about their views. The federal government has barred Canada Post from distributing the publication. The Canadian Anti-Hate Network says the verdict sends a message.
We are not afraid. We have Jesus on our side, and we're going to appeal. We're the largest Christian-backed newspaper in the world, and I find it very hard to believe that what we published about Jews and women, which a lot of it is right out of the Bible, is hate speech in Canada, and it's a very dark day for Christianity today.
The masthead of Your Ward News says, quote, Aboriginally owned and operated since 2007. Sears says he is a devout Christian, being persecuted for his beliefs, likening himself to Jesus. Sears and St. Germain say they plan to appeal the decision. A Winnipeg judge has sentenced one of the men found guilty of manslaughter in the killing of Jeanenne Fontaine in March 2017. As Brittany Hobson shows us, Wednesday's sentencing has allowed the family to move forward.
She's not held back in any way. Her spirit is free and resting. And no
Melissa Stevenson has found some closure after hearing a judge sentence Christopher Brass to 15 years in prison for his role in the killing of Jeanenne Fontaine. During her victim impact statement, Stevenson told the court her friend was like a butterfly, beautiful, small, and strong.
It's extremely important that we send a message that our lives of our Indigenous girls matter. She was important, she was loved, and we're happy with the sentencing today.
On Saturday, a jury found Brass and Jason Mayer guilty of manslaughter. Fontaine was found shot in the back of the head in her North End home in March 2017. Her home was then set on fire during what the Crown called a botched robbery. Court heard Mayer and Brass went to the home with a third man, Malcolm Mitchell, to collect a drug debt from Fontaine's boyfriend. When the three didn't find him there, they decided to rob Fontaine. Mitchell previously admitted to shooting Fontaine and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. In court, Justice Gerald Chartier said, a young woman, innocent of any wrongdoing, was killed for a $45 drug debt. Brass is already serving 2 life sentences for his role in the murders of Daniel DePaulo in Regina and Briar Parishnik Satie in Winnipeg. He will not be eligible for parole for 40 years. Stevenson had this message for him.
I would like to say that I hope he does find that true warrior role, the true warrior role, the warrior role that protects women, that stands beside women, that honors our traditional way of life.
Mayer is expected to be sentenced at a later date. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The case of a missing Nunavut woman last seen in Ottawa has been moved from a missing persons investigation to the Ottawa Police Major Crimes Unit, and they are asking for the public's help. Susan Kublu is an Inuk woman, 4 foot 11 inches tall with a stocky build, long black hair and brown eyes. She is known to frequent Ottawa's downtown and market areas. She has been missing since January 11th, and her family is concerned. Police want you to have a good look at this parka. It was handmade for Kublu, and she is known to wear it. If you have seen Kublu or her parka, please contact the Ottawa Police tip line at 613-236-1222, extension 5477. After the break, we'll get a look inside New Zealand's largest prison for women. But first, a look at what's coming up right after the news.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamaran, and here's what's coming up on Nation to Nation. There's been a flurry of education announcements this week by Indigenous services. It's not new money, It's just being distributed in allegedly an easier way. For example, a joint announcement by Indigenous Services and the Assembly of First Nations promises long-term sustained funding and a boost in money allocated for language and culture. In British Columbia, it's being welcomed as First Nations control over education. We speak to a principal from that province who says money targeting language and culture will go a long way. And we talk to an education expert in Quebec who says more needs to be done. That's right after the national news.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. +7 with rain for St. John's, a sunny high of 5 for Halifax. -3 and a rain-snow mix for Nain. +1 for Happy Valley, Goose Bay. -4 in Montreal, 21 below in Val-d'Or. In southern Ontario, -12 for Windsor, -6 in Toronto, Peterborough, and Ottawa. 23 below under sunny skies in Thunder Bay, -26 for Sioux Lookout. 34 below in Churchill, 28 below under sunny skies in Puckatawagan. -24 for Winnipeg, Gimli, Princess Harbor, and Barons River. Over in Saskatchewan, snow and -11 for Regina, snow and -5 for Swift. Welcome back. Our next story comes to us from our colleagues at Maori Television. Maori make up 62% of the population of New Zealand's largest prison for women. That number is rising, but there are efforts underway to counteract that.
There's no way I ever dreamed of coming to prison. One minute I'm looking after kids and doing the things that I love, next minute I'm in here.
I'm a natural leader, and to be in here, I did feel a bit like I was a failure. When I first come in here, I felt like I had failed my family.
Remorse and regrets from Maori women in prison, paying the price for their crimes.
Being out in the community, but still kind of serving your sentence.
Behind them, broken families and whakapapa in disarray.
I've got a couple of cousins in here that I never thought I'd ever see in prison, you know, but they made impulsive decisions that led them to be in here also.
I've never been away from my kids since the day I had them, and now my mum has to look after them. She's had to change her daily routine, and my kids are without me every day for as long as I'm in here.
This mum is in Auckland Regional Women's Correction Facility. There can be up to 450 women here, 62% of whom are Māori. Over the past 2 years, there's been a sharp rise in the number of women being incarcerated here.
For the first time ever, we've got a AOD.
Alison Fowley is the Assistant Prison Director.
Thinking about the social outcomes for Māori and the other contributing factors that go into it, so lower rates of achievement in education, lower rates of full-time employment, all contribute to that offending pathway and the pathway into facilities such as ours.
Inside this prison, women can upskill themselves. 67% arrive with poor literacy and numeracy skills, and many have never had a job.
We're looking at different ways for our wahine to learn, so those vocational and trades training is new for the site. We now have building and construction trades training. You saw our distribution centre in action earlier today, which is very, very busy, and our kitchen operates 2 cafes and a functions facility. All of those are linked to qualifications and then those release to work and employment opportunities upon release.
A number of providers work with the prison to offer trauma counselling, drug and alcohol rehabilitation and support living on the outside. But on the inside, Georgina Rewiri teaches tikanga and helps Māori prisoners reconnect to their whakapapa.
just teaching them their own pepeha is really empowering. They can become quite emotional too, because a lot of them, they do come in compromised. They've been away from their iwi, they've been away from their closer whānau.
Georgina runs Miri Miri Te Aroha, a program about kaupapa Māori values. The prisoners are practising with her for an upcoming pōhiri.
Kapaka has helped me. It's kept my wairua up, and it's kept me grounded also. It's kept me solid, it keeps me focused, and I know this helps me.
I hope that, what I do is enough here, what we do as ARWCF do enough to help equip the wahine to go out and go forward with their lives, and, saying to them, stealing is no good. But, you hear their answer, that's the only way to survive fire. I don't know how to fix that. I wish I did.
The prison acknowledges more solutions have to be driven by whānau, hapu and iwi. Visitor Ikaroa Rāwhiti MP Mika Whaitiri is helping to support housing and work opportunities for Māori prisoners released back into her electorate.
Creating jobs regionally off our Māori-owned assets, whether it be land, whether it be part of our treaty settlements, is something that we can do as Māori people. Absolutely there's a role for the government to play, but I want to pursue our own models of addressing high numbers of incarcerations by preventing them coming in through employment and education and training, but also when they come out, is how we awhi them back in.
The journey from childhood to incarceration is known as the school-to-prison pipeline. Tracy McIntosh, Professor of Indigenous Studies at Auckland University, says it starts early and nearly all Māori women in prison share the same journey.
We're seeing this really seamless movement from school, often into or alongside being in state care, into youth jurisdictions, into the prison system. Young women who come into the prison system have been excluded from the compulsory education system, usually by about 12, 13, some even younger than that. The potential of these young women.
For the past 10 years, Professor McIntosh has volunteered at the women's prison in the creative writing program. She says the poetry they write is inspirational and often heartbreaking.
Maybe chances were never chanced and life never breathed me. Maybe everyone gave up on me and the devil came and claimed me. Maybe failure was inevitable and the inevitable never failed me. Broken bones can always heal, but words seep in and remain painful to feel. Trapped souls struggle in the arms of hell, but in this cell, the walls never tell. Broken dreams reveal a forgotten call.
Female prisoners can undergo huge personal growth inside, but if they're released back into the same negative conditions, they're at risk of reoffending.
The ability to grow, the ability to heal, the ability to restore relationships, to restore whakapapa, that's not aligned. And that's a real issue, because that's one of the problems when you go out, that whānau may expect you to be like when you went in.
If you go back to what's always happened, or how it's always been, then there's not a lot that's going to change. That's why we need the assistance of the likes of Ngāti Porou. That's why it was so important that they were in here last week with those wahine, talking and giving that hope.
All the prisoners we spoke to know the odds are stacked against them. But despite that, they have huge hopes that life will be different on the outside.
The skills that I've learnt in here, I know that I can make use of them on the outside, and I'll be able to support my children and be able to do it on the right side of the law.
I'm going to be going to a place called Raw. It's for Reclaim Another Woman. If you really want to be something, they'll help you get there and do it and be it.
You know, my parents are getting old, so I want to be there for my parents and my family. That's one of my biggest things, is looking after my mum and dad.
An all-new episode of APTN Investigates debuts tomorrow night. We've got a preview of Broken Trust after the break. Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast, starting in northern Alberta, +1 in Peace River, +4 for Grand Prairie, +2 in Medicine Hat, +3 with showers in Calgary, +8 in Tofino and Victoria with rain expected. -5 with snow in Fort Nelson, +6 in Smithers, -18 in Old Crow, -1 for Whitehorse. In the NWT, -4 with snow for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, -23 in Yellowknife, 26 below for Sax Harbor, -22 in Paulatuck, -42 for Baker Lake, 38 below in Chesterfield, Arviette, and Cambridge Bay, -35 in Arctic Bay, 41 below in Joe Haven. Welcome back. Civil lawsuits are piling up against a Kelowna social worker accused of stealing funds from Indigenous children in care. Tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, video journalist Cullen Crozier takes a look behind the headlines to find out what went wrong with a system meant to protect vulnerable youth. Here's a preview of Broken Trust.
Nothing can replace the years that they took from us, because we talk about it now and we talk about our childhood, and we can only talk to a certain point.
He was a trusted social worker responsible for the care of hundreds of Indigenous children in BC's Okanagan Valley, now accused of orchestrating a financial scheme that embezzled what's believed to be millions from vulnerable youth.
He had us all fooled. Us too. I always thought I was a smart person, but he had me fooled. No wonder he could manipulate these kids.
In the last year, 5 separate civil suits and a proposed class action have been filed, all accusing Kelowna social worker Robert Riley Saunders of using his position to manipulate and defraud youth in care of BC's Ministry of Children and Family Development. According to the statements of claim, his actions left many of the children victimized and homeless.
This is a particularly brutal case where children are made homeless and destitute and are exploited, but in a systemic way over a long period of time. It's atrocious and horrific what happened to some of these children.
Looks good. That airs tomorrow night. And that is your APTN National News for this Thursday. For more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and stay up to date with the latest Indigenous news by downloading the APTN News app. Now stay tuned. Nation to Nation with Todd Lamoran's next. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.